Have you ever wondered how one company became more valuable than entire countries? Not because it discovered oil, not because it owned the world's biggest banks, and not because it sold billions of smartphones. Instead, its most valuable product is something most people will never even see: a tiny computer chip, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, yet powerful enough to reshape the future of humanity. Today, almost every major breakthrough in artificial intelligence depends on one company. From ChatGPT to self-driving cars, to humanoid robots, to scientific research, behind many of these technologies is one name: NVIDIA. Its chips have become so important that governments are restricting their exports. The world's largest technology companies are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to secure them. Nations now treat advanced AI chips as strategic assets, as valuable as oil once was. But here's what makes this story almost impossible to believe. 30 years ago, almost nobody cared about NVIDIA. The company was running out of money. Its first products failed. Its competitors were bigger, richer, and far more powerful. One more mistake, and NVIDIA would have disappeared forever. If history had taken a slightly different path, there might be no AI revolution as we know it today. No trillion-dollar NVIDIA. No Jensen Huang becoming one of the most influential leaders in technology. So how did a small startup, founded by 3 engineers inside a simple roadside restaurant, become the company powering the future of artificial intelligence? The answer isn't luck. It isn't perfect timing. And it certainly isn't an overnight success story. It's a story about patience, vision, relentless persistence, and one decision that looked completely insane for nearly 20 years. While almost every technology company focused on winning today's market, NVIDIA was quietly preparing for a future that didn't exist yet. Back then, the internet was still in its infancy. Google didn't exist. YouTube didn't exist. Facebook didn't exist. Even Amazon hadn't become the giant we know today. Artificial intelligence belonged to science fiction movies, not real life. Nobody imagined computers writing books, generating videos, creating realistic images, or having conversations that sounded almost human. Almost nobody, except one engineer. His name was Jensen Huang. While everyone else was building for the present, he was preparing for a world that only he could see. A world where computing power would become the most valuable resource on Earth. People laughed at the idea. Investors didn't understand it. Even experts believed it would never happen. But decades later, the entire world would discover that Jensen Huang wasn't building a graphics company. He was building the foundation of the AI age. And by the time everyone finally realized it, it was already too late to catch him. This is the unbelievable story of how NVIDIA went from the edge of bankruptcy to becoming the company powering the future of humanity. In 1993, Silicon Valley looked very different from the world we know today. The internet was still a mystery to most people. Smartphones didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. Artificial intelligence wasn't changing the world. The biggest names in technology were companies like Intel and Microsoft. Almost everyone believed the future of computing depended on making CPUs faster. But 3 engineers believed the future would take a completely different path. Their names were Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Preem. Each had spent years designing computer hardware. They understood something that most people overlooked. As computers became more powerful, graphics would become increasingly important. Video games were becoming more realistic. 3-dimensional graphics were beginning to replace simple 2-dimensional images. And they believed that one day, computers would need a completely new type of processor built specifically for these complex visual calculations. At the time, that idea sounded almost ridiculous. The market for advanced graphics processors was tiny. Most investors couldn't see why anyone would build an entire company around graphics. To them, it seemed like a niche business with very little future. But great companies are rarely built by following popular opinion. They're built by people willing to believe in something long before everyone else does. The 3 founders often met at a small Denny's restaurant in San Jose, California. There were no luxurious boardrooms, no billion-dollar investors, no massive offices, just 3 engineers, sitting around a table, sharing ideas over simple meals. 4 hours. They debated what the future of computing would look like. Finally, they made a decision that would change technology forever. They would start their own company, a company dedicated to building the world's most advanced graphics processors. They named it NVIDIA. The name was inspired by the Latin word invidia, meaning envy. Their goal was simple: build technology so powerful that competitors would envy it. It was an ambitious dream. But dreams alone don't build companies. Money was limited. Every dollar mattered. The team was small. Every engineer carried enormous responsibility. Meanwhile, their competitors had far greater resources. Companies like 3DFX, S3 Graphics, ATI, and Matrox were already fighting for dominance in the graphics market. Compared to them, NVIDIA looked insignificant. Many people believed the startup wouldn't survive more than a few years. But Jensen Huang embraced an unusual philosophy. He believed that if a product wasn't at least 10 times better than their competition, it wasn't worth building. That mindset pushed the team to think bigger, to move faster, and to take risks that larger companies were too afraid to take. Inside NVIDIA's tiny office, employees worked incredibly long hours. Sleeping under desks wasn't unusual. Weekends disappeared. Deadlines became everything. Everyone knew they weren't simply building another graphics card. They were fighting for survival. Every decision could determine whether the company lived or died. The pressure was enormous. Still, the team refused to slow down. After months of relentless work, NVIDIA was finally ready to introduce its very first product to the world. They believed it would announce their arrival. They believed it would prove the critics wrong. They believed it would secure the company's future. Instead, it would become one of the biggest disasters in NVIDIA's history. And within months, the company would find itself standing on the edge of bankruptcy. The future of NVIDIA would depend on one final chance. After months of relentless work, NVIDIA was finally ready to prove itself. The company's first major product was called the NV1. Jensen Huang believed this chip would introduce NVIDIA to the world. Investors were hopeful. Employees were excited. Everything depended on this one launch. But almost immediately, things started going wrong. The NV1 was built around an unusual graphics architecture. On paper, it looked innovative. In reality, it created a huge problem. Game developers didn't want to build games around NVIDIA's unique technology. They wanted something that worked across the entire industry. Then came an even bigger blow. Microsoft announced that Windows would use Direct 3D as its graphics standard. NVIDIA's architecture wasn't fully compatible. Overnight, the company's biggest advantage became its greatest weakness. PC manufacturers lost interest. Game developers ignored the product. Sales collapsed. Millions of dollars disappeared. For a young startup with very little cash, it was a disaster. Inside NVIDIA's office, panic began to spread. Employees questioned whether the company had any future. Investors started losing confidence. Some believed bankruptcy was only weeks away. According to Jensen Huang, NVIDIA had enough money to survive only a few more months. Every meeting became more intense. Every decision became more difficult. Imagine spending years chasing a dream, only to realize that one mistake might destroy everything. Most founders would have tried to protect what little they had left. They would have cut costs, reduced ambition, and hoped to survive. Jensen Huang chose a completely different path. He gathered the entire engineering team and admitted the truth. The NV1 had failed. There was no point pretending otherwise. Then he made a decision that shocked everyone. Scrap it. Start again. Months of engineering work were thrown away. Valuable time was lost. Money the company couldn't afford to lose was gone forever. It was one of the riskiest decisions in Silicon Valley at the time. But Jensen believed something that would define NVIDIA's culture for decades. If you fail, fail quickly. Learn even faster. Don't waste time defending bad decisions. Fix them. That philosophy became part of NVIDIA's DNA. The team immediately began designing an entirely new graphics chip. There was no guarantee it would succeed. There was no guarantee the company would still exist by the time it was finished. But this wasn't just another product anymore. It was NVIDIA's final chance. If this next chip failed, there would be no comeback, no second opportunity, no AI revolution. The future of NVIDIA now depended on one product, the Riva 128. And against all odds, it was about to change everything. In 1997, after months of relentless work, NVIDIA introduced the Riva 128. This wasn't just another graphics chip. It was the company's last chance to survive. Everyone inside NVIDIA understood the stakes. If customers rejected this product, there would be no future. But this time, Jensen Huang and his team had learned from their mistakes. Instead of forcing developers to adapt to NVIDIA's technology, NVIDIA built a chip that worked with the industry standards. It was faster, more affordable, easier to use, and most importantly, game developers loved it. PC manufacturers quickly began installing Riva 128 into their computers. Orders started arriving from around the world. For the first time in its history, NVIDIA was making real money. The company that had been on the edge of bankruptcy only months earlier was finally profitable. Employees who once feared losing their jobs suddenly realized they had helped save the company. Investors regained confidence. NVIDIA had survived. But Jensen Huang wasn't satisfied. To most companies, survival would have been enough. To Jensen, survival was only the beginning. He believed graphics technology was advancing far faster than anyone realized. Video games were becoming more realistic every year. Developers wanted richer environments, smoother animation, and cinematic visual effects. Traditional processors couldn't keep up forever. Jensen saw an opportunity that others missed. Instead of simply building faster graphics cards, NVIDIA could invent an entirely new category of processor. 2 years later, that vision became reality. In 1999, NVIDIA introduced the GeForce 256. The company called it the world's first GPU. GPU, Graphics Processing Unit. Today, the term sounds ordinary, but in 1999, it changed the technology industry forever. Unlike a CPU, which processes tasks one after another, a GPU could perform thousands of calculations at the same time. That made it perfect for rendering complex 3D graphics. Games suddenly looked more realistic than ever before. Characters moved naturally. Shadows became dynamic. Lighting became cinematic. Explosions felt alive. Gamers were amazed. Developers embraced the new technology. NVIDIA had done more than launch a successful product. It had changed the future of computer graphics. Soon, GeForce became one of the most recognizable names in gaming. NVIDIA's biggest competitor, ATI, fought aggressively to keep up. Every year, both companies raced to build faster, more powerful, and more advanced graphics cards. It became one of the fiercest rivalries in technology history. But while the rest of the industry was focused on making video games look better, Jensen Huang was quietly thinking about something much bigger. In his mind, gaming was never the destination. It was only the beginning. Every new GPU, every engineering breakthrough, every improvement in performance was preparing NVIDIA for a future that almost nobody could imagine. A future where graphics processors wouldn't just create virtual worlds. They would help build intelligent machines. And that future was getting closer than anyone realized. By the early 2000s, NVIDIA had become one of the biggest names in gaming. Millions of gamers around the world were buying GeForce graphics cards. Revenue was growing. Profits were rising. Investors were happy. From the outside, NVIDIA looked like a complete success. Most CEOs would have protected that success. They would have focused on selling more graphics cards, improving gaming performance, and maximizing profits. But Jensen Huang wasn't interested in building a great gaming company. He wanted to build the future of computing. One question kept running through his mind. What if a GPU could do far more than render graphics? What if those thousands of tiny processing cores could solve scientific problems? analyze enormous amounts of data, and perform calculations that ordinary CPUs would take days or even weeks to finish. At first, almost nobody believed it. To most people, a graphics card existed for one purpose: playing video games. Nothing more. Even many engineers thought the idea was unrealistic. The hardware was powerful, but programming it for anything beyond graphics was incredibly difficult. That was the biggest obstacle. So instead of waiting for someone else to solve the problem, NVIDIA decided to solve it themselves. In 2006, the company introduced a platform called CUDA. On the surface, it didn't look revolutionary. It wasn't a flashy graphics card. It wasn't a product gamers could proudly install in their computers. It was software, a programming platform. Most people ignored it. Investors questioned why NVIDIA was spending so much money on something that generated almost no immediate profit. Some analysts even argued that the company was wasting valuable resources. But Jensen Huang wasn't thinking about the next quarter. He was thinking about the next 20 years. CUDA allowed programmers to unlock the true power of NVIDIA's GPUs. For the first time, scientists, engineers, researchers, and developers could use graphics processors to solve problems far beyond gaming. Universities began experimenting with CUDA. Research laboratories started adopting it. Medical researchers used it to accelerate complex simulations. Engineers used it to design better machines. Financial institutions used it to analyze massive datasets. Slowly, a new ecosystem began to form. Every developer who learned CUDA became more connected to NVIDIA. Every new research project strengthened the platform. Every new breakthrough attracted even more developers. What looked like an ordinary software platform was becoming one of the strongest competitive advantages in the technology industry. Competitors could copy hardware. They could build faster chips. They could lower prices. But copying an ecosystem built over years was a completely different challenge. Without realizing it, NVIDIA wasn't just selling graphics cards anymore. It was building a foundation that thousands of companies, universities, and researchers would depend on. And while the world remained focused on gaming, something extraordinary was beginning to happen inside research labs around the globe. A new technology was quietly evolving. A technology that demanded enormous computing power. A technology that needed exactly what NVIDIA had spent more than a decade preparing to build. That technology was artificial intelligence. And when the AI revolution finally arrived, NVIDIA wouldn't be trying to catch up. It would already be waiting. 4 years. NVIDIA kept investing in technology that most people barely noticed. CUDA continued to grow. Its GPUs became more powerful with every generation. Thousands of researchers adopted the platform. But outside the world of science and engineering, almost nobody paid attention. Then, everything changed. In 2012, a breakthrough in deep learning shocked the AI community. A neural network called AlexNet dramatically outperformed every other system in the ImageNet competition. But the real surprise wasn't just the software. It was the hardware. AlexNet had been trained using NVIDIA GPUs. That single moment changed the future of artificial intelligence. Researchers around the world realized that GPUs could train AI models dramatically faster than traditional CPUs. Suddenly, every AI laboratory wanted NVIDIA hardware. Universities expanded their GPU clusters. Technology companies increased their investments. Startups rushed to build AI products. NVIDIA had spent nearly 2 decades preparing for a market that had finally arrived. As AI advanced, demand for computing power exploded. Machine learning models became larger. Datasets became bigger. Every new generation of AI required more GPUs than the one before. NVIDIA wasn't just selling chips anymore. It was becoming the engine behind modern AI. Then came another turning point. Generative AI entered the mainstream. Chatbots could answer questions. AI could generate realistic images. It could write code, summarize documents, create music, and even produce videos. Millions of people suddenly experienced the power of AI for the first time. Behind many of those breakthroughs, NVIDIA's hardware was working quietly inside massive data centers. Companies around the world raced to build even more powerful AI models. They needed thousands of GPUs, then tens of thousands. Some companies began ordering hundreds of thousands of advanced AI chips at a time. The demand was unlike anything the semiconductor industry had ever seen. NVIDIA struggled to manufacture enough hardware to satisfy customers. Waiting lists grew longer. Every shipment sold out almost immediately. Technology giants invested billions of dollars into AI infrastructure. Building the future of artificial intelligence had become one of the most expensive races in history. Quarter after quarter, NVIDIA reported record-breaking revenue. Profits reached levels few companies had ever achieved. Its market value climbed into the trillions of dollars. Jensen Huang, the engineer who once worried about making payroll, became one of the most influential leaders in global technology. But NVIDIA's success wasn't built on hardware alone. It had spent decades creating an ecosystem that customers didn't want to leave. CUDA, developer tools, AI libraries, networking technology, and powerful software all work together. Buying an NVIDIA GPU wasn't just buying a chip. It was joining an ecosystem refined over more than 30 years. That ecosystem became NVIDIA's greatest strength. And while the company stood at the center of the AI revolution, the rest of the world was preparing to challenge its dominance. Because whenever one company becomes this powerful, competition is inevitable. As NVIDIA's dominance grew, so did the pressure from every direction. The opportunity was simply too big to ignore. Artificial intelligence was no longer just another technology trend. It had become the foundation of the next industrial revolution. Every major technology company wanted a share of the future. AMD accelerated the development of its AI accelerators. Intel invested billions of dollars to rebuild its position. Google continued improving its custom tensor processing units. Amazon introduced its own AI chips for cloud computing. Microsoft began designing custom hardware to reduce its dependence on NVIDIA. The message was clear. Nobody wanted to rely on a single company forever. But building a powerful chip was only part of the challenge. The real advantage wasn't hidden inside the silicon. It was hidden inside the ecosystem. For decades, NVIDIA had invested in software, developer tools, networking, and AI frameworks. Millions of developers already knew how to build using CUDA. Thousands of companies had optimized their applications for NVIDIA hardware. Universities trained students on NVIDIA platforms. Research laboratories built entire infrastructures around its technology. Replacing NVIDIA wasn't as simple as buying another chip. It meant rebuilding years of software, rewriting applications, retraining engineers, and accepting slower progress. That made NVIDIA's position incredibly difficult to challenge. Then another player entered the race. Governments. AI chips were no longer viewed as ordinary computer components. They became strategic assets. Countries realized that whoever controlled advanced computing power could influence the future of science, medicine, defense, cybersecurity, and economic growth. Export restrictions were introduced on some of NVIDIA's most advanced AI chips. Global supply chains became more complicated. The competition was no longer just between companies. It had become a geopolitical race. Nations started investing billions of dollars to build their own AI infrastructure. Data centers expanded across the world. Every government wanted to secure enough computing power for the future. For the first time in history, a chip company stood at the center of global politics, business, and technological innovation. Yet the biggest question still remained. Could NVIDIA stay on top? History suggests that no technology giant remains the leader forever. Once, IBM dominated computing. Then Intel. Then Microsoft. Then Apple. Then Google. Every giant eventually faced a new challenger. NVIDIA understands that better than anyone. After all, it survived by disrupting companies that once seemed impossible to defeat. Today, it stands in the position those companies once held. The company continues investing billions into new AI chips, robotics, autonomous systems, quantum computing, and next-generation AI infrastructure. Jensen Huang knows that standing still is the fastest way to fall behind. Because in technology, yesterday's breakthrough quickly becomes tomorrow's standard. The race is far from over. In many ways, it has only just begun. And whether NVIDIA remains the undisputed leader, or one day passes the crown to a new challenger, its impact on the world is already impossible to erase. It didn't just participate in the AI revolution, it helped create it. History has taught us one lesson again and again. No company stays on top forever. Markets change. Technology evolves. New competitors emerge. But every once in a while, a company comes along that doesn't just adapt to the future, it helps create it. NVIDIA is one of those companies. It didn't become one of the world's most valuable businesses because it got lucky. It became a leader because it spent decades preparing for opportunities that most people couldn't even imagine. While others focused on quarterly profits, NVIDIA invested in long-term innovation. While others built products, NVIDIA built an entire ecosystem. And while others reacted to change, NVIDIA helped define it. Today, NVIDIA's technology is accelerating medical research, powering autonomous vehicles, advancing robotics, driving scientific discoveries, and shaping the future of artificial intelligence. Whether the company remains the king of AI for the next decade, or whether a new challenger eventually takes its place, one fact will never change. NVIDIA transformed the technology industry forever. Perhaps that's the biggest lesson in this story. The greatest opportunities are rarely obvious. They belong to the people willing to think years ahead, to take risks when everyone else is afraid, and to keep building, even when nobody believes in their vision. The next time you use an AI chatbot, watch an AI-generated video, or witness a breakthrough that once seemed impossible, remember this. Behind many of those innovations, there's a good chance an NVIDIA chip is quietly doing the work. A company that nearly disappeared is now helping build the future of humanity. And maybe that's what separates truly extraordinary companies from everyone else. They don't chase the future, they create it. If you enjoyed this documentary and learned something new, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel reach more people who love business and technology stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we explore the rise of the world's biggest companies, the strategies behind billion-dollar empires, and the ideas shaping our future. And now, I want to hear from you. Which company should we cover next? Apple, TSMC, OpenAI, BlackRock, or another company that's changing the world? Leave your suggestion in the comments below. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and always look beyond the headlines.